This is TWiT.
Very interested about this topic here. Microsoft has finally announced that its dual-screen Android device, the Surface Duo, is going to release on September 10th. That is one day ahead of my birthday, so if anyone wants to get me a gift, you know what to get me. It's priced like a premium Android smartphone. It starts at $1,399. That's $1,399. And it's a Surface device through and through, even though it's running Android, of course. Joining us to talk about his time with the pre-release version of the hardware, how it works into Microsoft's mobile strategy, and a whole lot more is Harry McCracken from Fast Company. Harry, it's been a while. It's good to see you.
Hey, folks. Great to be here.
Great to have you on. Thank you for taking time with us, especially because you had some time with a device that I feel like a lot of people have been talking about this past year, at least since Microsoft kind of announced this way back when, last year sometime, I think maybe midway through last year. So it's been a while. Let's start with the hardware itself. For those who aren't familiar, this is the Surface Duo. What is Microsoft set to release when this hardware comes out? Who is it designed for? What's your take on that?
Well, after having used it for about a week and a half and talked to Panos Panay, the Surface chief, and Satya Nadella about it, it's essentially, it's a on this most obvious level, it's a two-screened Android phone, but really what Microsoft wanted to build was a great device to run Office and Microsoft 365, and in general, the Microsoft suite of productivity apps. So it's a smartphone design with productivity front and center in a way that it is not usually with smartphones.
So it's a dual screen device. We're seeing a lot of foldables right now. Foldable seems to be a thing that started catching some steam, or at least some attention last year, even though they're usually pretty darn expensive. Some foldables have an actual foldable screen. This goes the route of having kind of the seam in the middle with, from what I understand, a pretty interesting hinge design to fold it around. It kind of reminds me in some ways, this is the LG Velvet, and of course LG on their V60 and the LG Velvet, they have this case that adds a second screen. So I guess in some ways it's similar to this, which has me wondering, like, what is the Surface Duo, in your experience with the device? What is it going to do better than, say, an LG Velvet that has a dual screen attachment that allows you to do dual screen stuff?
Yeah, by not using folding screen technology, Microsoft avoided the fact that that's kind of a bleeding edge technology. And the big catch with doing two screens, and I'm trying to hold it up in front of my camera. There we go.
There you go.
Wow.
The big catch with using two screens rather than one folding screen is you do get that line up the middle. And so they did take that into consideration. And if you take an app like the Office app and span it across both screens, it reconfigures itself basically to in a way that's useful and avoids the line down the middle. So you have, like, in Word, you have your list of documents down one side, and on the other side, you have your document itself. And the fact there's a line up the middle is not a problem. With non-Microsoft apps, if you span it across both screens right now, sometimes it's an issue because you get like an obstructed view of your own document. But Microsoft is working with third-party developers, and hopefully at least some of them will design their apps with the Duo and two screens in mind. I'd say in general, how it's better than past attempts at two screens is that Microsoft did a really good job with the hinge. From all those Surfaces with their kickstands, they have lots of experience with hinges, and this device folds really nicely. It's a 180-degree hinge, so you can swing it all the way back. You can lie it flat. You can use it like a tiny laptop where one screen is up and the other screen is your keyboard. And so just in general, the two-screen aspect of it is really nicely done.
And Harry, you just, I believe you held it up. I was under the impression that you didn't have this device anymore. So is that the Surface Duo that you have in your hands, or is that like I
have the Surface Duo. I do need to send it back at some point, but at the moment, still got it.
Want to, yeah, hold it back forward. I really want to take a look at this and see just kind of the size of it in your hands.
Yeah, okay, it's not as big as I thought.
There we go. There we go.
It's what it is it's quite wide. Like I couldn't put it in my shirt pocket. Jeans pocket is okay, and it is really thin. When it's folded, you fold it flat, it's super thin. It's thinner than other smartphones.
Oh, wow.
And when you fold it up, it's, It's thicker than a smartphone, but it's still, I'd say, surprisingly thin. It's nowhere near twice as thick as a smartphone, and it's thinner than something like the Galaxy Fold. So the width is unusual, and they did the width basically because they wanted to have each screen be a little bit like a laptop screen, which is kind of what you want for productivity. Smartphones have gotten bigger. They've really kind of emphasized height over width, and this is both wide and tall, which is kind of what you want if you're using Word or Excel or doing something like doing Microsoft Teams on one of the screens and checking out your OneNote notes on the other one. It's really kind of like a dual monitor setup on your desktop, but in a smaller size.
All right, so people are getting pretty excited about this. Now, you mentioned in your piece that the hardware obviously is very intriguing. The software you mentioned is kind of buggy. This is pre-release software that's on here. Microsoft did have an earlier, a potentially earlier release date. They've bumped that back to September 10th. You posited in the piece that, that gives them time at least to address some of these software issues. But given that this is kind of beta software, let's say, were you able to get enough of a sense of the software to know its potential once all of these bugs are addressed? Like, what does it go above and beyond, and does it satisfy what you were looking for?
Yeah, I mean, basically, being able to use two apps at once on a smartphone is really nice. Generally speaking, with conventional smartphones, either you can't do that, or there have been some attempts at doing it kind of like Samsung has a mode where you can pull up two apps, but it's still on one screen. So it's two extremely small apps at one time. And with the Surface, you really can pull up two apps at once. It's great for something like if you're writing something in Word, but want to do your research in the browser. You can have both of those at a larger size than on any other phone, given that even the single individual screens are really large. And as I said, with the Microsoft apps, you can get this kind of a Jumbotron effect where you're spanning one app across both screens. And as long as an app has been designed with that in consideration, that's really nice too.
Yeah, and I feel like that part is pretty critical because, I mean, I remember, God, it must have been like 2012. There was a Sony Tablet P. It's always the one that I refer to when we talk about foldables, because that was a really old foldable, and it did the design, the like hinge design in the middle, split the screen into two. Didn't quite have the ability, if I remember correctly, to take content and put it just on one screen versus the other. And if it did, it was probably just some, a handful of built-in app. That's it right there. So I guess looking at it, they are able to do it in some ways, but I felt like in my time playing with it, most everything that I wanted to do with it kind of stretched across these two screens, and that seam just ended up being kind of a challenge to work around. So I think having some sort of added compatibility baked into it, so that apps can kind of morph and play with that screen real estate is really important. And of course, this is a Microsoft device. People who are getting this are probably all in on Microsoft ecosystem to begin with. So they're going to be pretty happy with what Microsoft is offering, let alone any other developers. Would you agree with that?
Well, they really are catering to people who, in a lot of cases, are Surface fans, and also are people who do live in the Microsoft apps. So if you're a Microsoft person, you're probably going to be way happier with this out of the box than if you're using Gmail and Google Docs and so forth. Google would have to build better support for that experience to be as good as the Microsoft experience is already. And as I mentioned, I did find quite a few bugs, so that's a little bit of a concern. But as long as what Microsoft ships is a little bit more reliable than what I did conceptually, they did a very good job of figuring out how to build a good two-screen device from a hardware standpoint, and also figuring out kind of the tools and features you want to make it work well on the software side. You can also pair two apps so that if you always want Word and the Edge browser to pop up as a pair, you can do that, which is nicely done. And that's the kind of thing that I wish the iPad had.
Right. And this is launching, of course, with Android 10. I imagine, hopefully Microsoft is quick enough on the upgrade to 11 once Android 11 comes out in who knows when, but probably next month or very soon after that. And I do know that Android 11 has expanded support for dual screen devices. So, it all seems to be coming together at about the same time. I have to imagine that's going to benefit the Duo as a result. Now, speaking of hardware, it does make some trade-offs, and people are very quick to kind of point to this, especially tech enthusiasts who are so specs-driven. It's easy to look at this and be like, oh, wait a minute, the processor is a year old. There's no 5G. There's no NFC if you want to use this for mobile payments. Do you think Microsoft chose these sacrifices appropriately, like well enough, or in your time using it where you're like, I know they did this to save on cost or whatever their reasons were, but I do really wish it was here, like it's lacking without it?
Yeah, I mean, they really focused on the stuff they cared about and ignored the stuff they didn't. So it's a very different device in terms of the emphasis from any other smartphone out there. I'd say the one thing that if I were to use this as my main phone that might bug me on an ongoing basis is it feels like it's not going to be great as a photography phone. It has one camera, and it's in front-facing mode for video calls, which, because this is a productivity device, is important. It seems fine, and you can flip the phone around and use that as a rear-facing camera as well. But it's just one camera. It's 11 megapixels. It's just not kind of as natural as what you can do with most smartphones, where you can pull them out of your pocket and be ready to shoot really quickly. So that's kind of is the one major thing standing in my way. And I could probably live without Google Pay, even though I do like Google Pay. And I like wireless charging too, but I could probably sacrifice that. So it'll be interesting to see whether that's an obstacle and whether at one point, if Microsoft sticks with this, and there is like a Surface Duo 2, whether they start to bring back some of that functionality they sacrificed in this one. Yeah, it's really thin too, partially because other smartphones have camera bumps, and that's what lets them have 3 or 4 cameras. And Microsoft just gave that up to build the device they wanted to build.
Okay, and that makes sense. I mean, the thinness of this, especially considering the fact that it's kind of a wider device, that thinness is going to help make up for that. So, I think that's a perfectly reasonable trade-off or expectation to say, hey, if you're getting this, you're getting it more for productivity than you are for a masterful photography, when you're out about in the world, as long as it's serviceable enough.
Yeah, I mean, you could theoretically have a smartphone and this. It would be pretty pricey, given that this is a $1,400 device. But there have been other instances throughout history where people have had like 2 phones. Remember, back in the day, people would have a BlackBerry and a personal phone. So it's not entirely out of the question that some people might be excited about this and not so excited about giving up some stuff and having a phone they use all the time, and this, which is kind of a significant part of their workday, but not their only device that can make a phone call.
Sure. Now, ultimately, Microsoft decided, and this is my last question here, decided to move forward with the Duo, of course, in this very interesting time that we're in. Perhaps, you could argue that right now is not the time that this device was designed with in mind. Of course, nothing was designed with this moment in mind, but they are moving forward with the Duo, but they've postponed the Neo indefinitely. That's the Windows device, the foldable device. What does that decision tell you about Microsoft's thinking as far as these 2 devices are concerned, that they would continue on with this mobile version, but not the larger Windows version?
Yeah, I mean, they've been a little bit vague about why they postponed it, other than to say that they have other priorities right now. And it sounds like part of it is that, they are working on this version of Windows 10 that's optimized for 2 screens. And that sounds like a large project in and of itself. And my assumption is they need some more time to get that right. And without that new version of Windows, then the Neo doesn't make sense. That's a device, because it has these larger screens and runs Windows, that it's probably not competing with your phone for your attention. It's really more of, for some people, it might be a primary laptop, and for others, it's competing with something like the iPad or an Android tablet, as you probably have your laptop, and then you have a tablet, which would be the Neo.
Yeah. And let's be real, it's probably competing with the iPad because Android tablets aren't aren't really commanding much of the marketplace as far as
there are some nice
concerned.
Android tablets, and Samsung certainly makes some good ones. But
Sure.
it's Samsung seems more excited about it than actual tablet users.
Yep.